Now, you see, the world is full of temptations.
Temptations?
Yep, temptations. They're the wrong things that seem right at the time.
So now we have Pinocchio, the story of a little wooden puppet who wants to be a real boy. And I'm just going to say, it's going to be kind of hard to talk about the original films without kind of divorcing myself from how I saw them as a kid, because I saw so many of these movies at such a young age. It's kind of lodged in my brain. It's a little easier with the later films to kind of be more analytical and look at the good and the bad, and, you know, being older and hopefully more mature and knowing what I know about film and animation. But it is kind of hard when you have movies that you saw for the first time as a little kid. You watch them again and it kind of takes you back to where you were as a little kid. And for a lot of these movies, you're gonna hear me say that they really weren't my favorite Disney movie. I have a very strong attachment to the Disney Renaissance films. They were the ones that were coming out when I was a kid. So I was watching them as a kid and really falling in love with them. The kind of Golden Age movies, I'm not as fond of, I think, because they were released, before I was born, and I kind of didn't attach to them as well. As an adult today, of course, I can appreciate them for the art and what they do have to offer, but it is still hard to kind of like try to determine how much of what I feel about them is just residual from my childhood or is really reflective of the movie. So with that out of the way, let's just start talking about Pinocchio, shall we? And it is also kind of hard to talk about Pinocchio without relating it to Snow White, because this was the second movie. It had a much bigger budget than Snow White, and it shows. The art and design for this movie are really, really beautiful. The backgrounds are gorgeous, and I love the animation, especially on the title character. Like, the stuff that they do with Pinocchio, especially because he's a puppet, they can do some really creative things with the way he moves and how he expresses himself. Like, there's that one joke when Geppetto says, turn around and let me look at you, and Pinocchio kind of just, he spins his whole body around and keeps his head in one place because he can do that because he's a puppet. And it just, like the way Pinocchio in particular is animated, if you're studying animation, you should definitely study his character specifically and how he moves. The animation on Geppetto is really good, and the animation on Honest John and Gideon the Cat are, Stromboli, all of these, like, really, really excellent character animation, so study it just for that. And I gotta say, I love the character design of Pinocchio. There's just something really charming about that character and how he looks. He's got kind of like that wide-eyed, innocent look, and it's so cute. It's a little weird when he becomes real boy at the end. It's kind of like the Beauty and the Beast effect, but what are you gonna do? Monster the Whale looks spectacular. Like, that climax just looks amazing. There's so much action, and it's going underwater, and it still looks really very good. Of course, we've come a long way in terms of both technology that we can use both to 2D and 3D animation, but for what it is at its time, that climax scene with the battle with Monstro, it holds up very well. The Blue Fairy is kind of rendered in the same way that, or her design is similar to Snow White in that she's kind of she's got that more realistic and human look about her than the rest of the cast, who are very cartoony. But that gap has lessened a little bit. Like, I felt like she was a lot more expressive, and I never got that, like, dead-eyed feeling that I sometimes got when I was watching Snow White. Again, like I said, you can tell that the budget was raised for Pinocchio. But unfortunately, most of the good things I have to say about the movie are all about the visuals, because, again, this was not one of my favorite Disney movies. It's still not, and I think it is because of the darker tone of the film, and I do love a lot of Disney's darker movies, but I I think it's going to be because, like, just to skip ahead a bit, a lot of it does have to do with the donkeys and the fact that there's no resolution to that storyline, but I think part of it is just because the world that Pinocchio is set in is just so strange. I think it's one of the strangest worlds ever created in a Disney movie. Like, okay, so there's magic. There's obviously magic because there's the blue fairy, and there's a potion that can turn boys into donkeys, but there's a talking anthropomorphic fox and a cat, and nobody questions this, and yet, you know, there's an anthropomorphic cricket, but yet there are real animals, like the little figure of the cat. He's not anthropomorphic, he can't talk, and you know, you see Jiminy the cricket, you know, he's anthropomorphic and he can talk, but then you see him later, he's with a bunch of moths, and they can't talk, and it just, I don't know, it's weird, it's strange, it's like, what are the rules of this world? And I know it's a fairy tale, but nitpick. The pacing is not as good as it was in Snow White. Snow White, there were a lot of scenes that were longer, but they all seem to fit. They all seem to serve a purpose in the story. There were maybe scenes I could say, yeah, okay, make it a little shorter, but none that I would say, cut that out. And with Pinocchio, there were definitely a few times that I felt like, did that scene really contribute anything to the movie? And, you know, that's never a good sign. Jiminy Cricket, I remember being entertained by him as a kid, but as an adult watching, it's like, you know, there are times when he kind of turns to the audience and kind of, like, tells you how you should be feeling. Like, there are times when something cute and funny happens on screen, and like he'll turn to the audience and kind of cover his mouth and laugh, and it's almost like flashing a sign that says laugh at this point, and it's like, wow, I never noticed that. That's kind of annoying. Also, what is it with, like, he hits on everything female shaped in the movie, and it's like, that's a little weird. I don't know. I still think some of the things that he did were charming and cute, but he was definitely a lot more annoying than I remembered him being. Although Geppetto, I never really liked. It just, he always seemed to be really irresponsible to me. You know, he has this wooden puppet, he wishes for a real boy, he gets his wish, and then, you know, he sends Pinocchio out into the real world and doesn't even bother to tell him stranger danger, like that. He tells him he needs to be good, and he needs to do the right things and make the right choices, but he doesn't even give him any instruction for how to do good things, and just sends him out into the world, like, a day after gaining consciousness, like okay. And then, you know, he's amazed when Pinocchio doesn't come home that night. He's like, what could have happened to him? Like, literally anything. You know, one of the simplest things in the world happened to him, you know, stranger danger, he talked with someone he probably shouldn't have, but, you know, still. And then, you know, then he's like, he's gonna go look for Pinocchio, and he tells his animals they can't eat until he gets back. But here's what really blows my mind, is that, so he goes out into the rain looking for Pinocchio, and he leaves Figaro and the little goldfish behind. But in the climax, when, you know, he's been swallowed by the whale and Pinocchio has to go rescue him, Figaro and Cleo are with him, which means he went out to look for Pinocchio and did the smart thing by leaving his pets at home, and then he went back to get his pets and go looking again with them, and this time they got swallowed by a whale. Like, how does that even happen? That's what I mean when I say, like, this is one of the stranger Disney movies where it's like, you know, I know it's a fairy tale, but what's the logic? How did we get from, you know, walking around on dry land looking for your son to swallowed by a whale? I have no idea what the context was in the original book, but yeah, that always kind of bothered me. It's like, what? And let's just talk about the thing that everybody has talked about. Pleasure Island with the boys that get turned into goats, and there's no resolution for it. First of all, that whole scene is just terrifying. And then we see the boys get turned into goats, and the coachman is shipping them off to salt mines and stuff like that. But the ones who can still talk, he keeps behind in a pen to do who knows what to. Pinocchio escapes, but he doesn't tell his father about what happened and doesn't alert the police or anything. And it's like, he's supposed to earn being brave, unselfish, and truthful. It's like, well, then tell expose this big conspiracy that's going on in Pleasure Island. And, I read that in the context of the original book, the boys getting turned into donkeys was a metaphor for people who don't get an education not being able to get a good high-paying jobs and having to go into more like labor-based work. And I can understand the metaphor, but it just maybe it was more relevant for the times. It's not a lesson that has aged well, and I'm just not sure it was presented the best it could have been in the Disney version. I'm just saying. Also, going back to that climax scene, yes, it's exciting and it's really well animated, but Geppetto's in the belly of that whale with Figaro and Cleo, and when they escape, how did Figaro and Cleo make it out all right? Because we're talking about a tiny kitten and a goldfish in a bowl, a glass bowl, being tossed around on these waves, being chased by a giant whale, and you don't see them for most of the climax. Like, you see them at first when they're all on the raft, but then the raft starts to break up, and they're swimming away from the whale as fast as they can, and you don't see them, and then suddenly they just wash right up on the shore, and Cleo's still in her goldfish bowl, and it's just like, what? So I know I'm thinking way too hard about this kind of stuff, but that's what I do. And so for me, then, this just is not one of the more fun Disney movies to watch, because it scared me when I was a kid. All these dangerous things, these terrible things happening to Pinocchio. And as an adult, I can't get behind all the logic blocks that this movie throws up. It's still a beautiful film, of course, and it has a lot of visual merit. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. If you're a fan of Disney, if you're a fan of fairy tales, if you're a fan of animation, or are studying animation, definitely watch this film. Not one of my favorites. Can't say that it's one I would want to watch all that much.
Your dream